Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round talk series bringing you the best creative voices across entertainment, and today we are joined by the fantastic Bonnie McKee, who is a songwriter who's written songs with and for artists ranging from Katy Perry, Taya Cruz, Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears, and so many more, and also recently wrote and directed her first narrative short film called April Kills the Vibe. And I wanted to start by talking a lot about your songwriting. And when you first started out as a performer as well, when you were younger, I heard that you had a lot of stage fright to the point where it would even cause you to lose your voice a lot of times before you were going on stage. And so I'm really, really fascinated in how you work to overcome that, because every artist and every performer deals with stage fright in some form or another and has to kind of navigate how they can individually approach it.
Oh yeah, I definitely still have stage fright. And when I'll be in the car on the way to a show, I'll just say to the driver, I'm like, can you just drive right off of Mulholland real quick? Or just turn around and go home. We don't need to do this at all. Yeah, it's like when you get on a roller coaster and you like strap yourself in and you're like, oh, why did I do this? Why did I do this? And then once you get on stage and you go up, you're just like, oh, I want to go again. So yeah, when I was younger, I used to get really terrible stage fright to the point, like you said, where I would lose my voice, completely psychosomatic. And when I finally got a record deal and moved out to LA, I ended up going to hypnotherapy and it really works. It's like I went for a couple of weeks and then I never lost my voice because of my mind again. I still get scared, but I think that adrenaline is probably what, gets you through the show. So
Yeah. And then after releasing that first album of your own, you then moved into publishing deals and songwriting for other artists. What was that journey of learning to write for other people's voices and not necessarily just thinking about the story that you wanted to tell, and the types of questions that you tend to ask artists when you're in the room with them, when you're figuring out what's important to them, what sort of story do they want to tell, what sort of voice do they want to have through the music that you're collaborating on?
mhm. Yeah, going from writing for myself and saying whatever I want to having to think about what somebody else wants to say was definitely an adjustment in the beginning. But I've always been kind of an empath, and so songwriting sessions are often like a therapy session. One of the first things I ask when I sit down with someone is like, "What's going on in your life? What keeps you up at night?" And then I sort of try to weave it into pretty pictures and put that into words for them. But it's really rewarding to be able to tell someone's story for them.
Yeah. And even before you got that publishing deal, you really took a lot of time. It wasn't that you were building relationships, going out to parties. It was that you actually just like stayed at home and did the work and spent several hours every day songwriting to really develop that skill set for yourself. What are the tools that you feel that you had the opportunity to really develop and hone just by focusing solely on it, even before you were starting to sell songs to other artists?
Yeah, I really had no social life for a good decade. I mean, I had friends in the studio, luckily. It's a fun environment because you're with other creatives and everyone's just as insane as you are. So I hunkered down and I stayed in the studio and I just wrote as much as I could, because every time you write a song, you learn something new. And it's about learning how to get through the obstacles. When you hit a roadblock, when you write yourself into a corner, like I know now how to maneuver around it or over it or under it. And that makes it a lot easier. Because also when you're writing on demand, it used to be when I was writing for myself that I could just kind of, write whenever inspiration struck. But when it's like you're going in every day and you have to come up with something cool every day, then you have to be prepared. You have to know how to get around those roadblocks.
I think it's so interesting as well that you always start with the song title, and that's the original genesis of where a journey is going to go. And that you even have a notebook full of various song titles that you might jump into. When you first sit there with that song title, how does that then tell you the voice of what the rest of the song and the rest of the lyrical structure might end up being?
Well, in pop music, usually there's a track already made. Sometimes we'll start from scratch, but I collaborate with producers who put together chord progressions and sounds. And so the track will already kind of have a vibe. So usually I'll listen to a track first and then kind of look through my list of titles and think like, is it song happy? Is it sad? Is it party? Is it angry? Whatever. And then I try to find the titles that sort of match the vibe of the track.
And the journey of songs as well is always so fascinating, because it often feels like music is telling us like the minute details of a much larger story. Do you start by kind of constructing what the larger concept of the song is going to be and then figuring out the tiny details and the way that you can flesh it out from there?
Yeah, I think that's why I like to start with the title, because it's so much easier, to have, like for instance, Roar. It's, you it's a fight song. It's a song about perseverance. And so, we pulled from like boxing metaphors and, all of the different things that come with that, and floating like a butterfly, stinging like a bee, stuff like that. So when you come up with a title first, it's a lot easier to sort of, because if you look at a title, you can make a list of all the things that relate to that and then figure out what rhymes, and then try to throw in the emotions that underlie that, so it's kind of a fun little puzzle.
And I wanted to talk a little bit about, writing that and several other tracks that you wrote with Katy Perry, because the two of you had been friends for several years before you jumped into writing songs with her on her second album. What was the difference for you in writing music for her when you already knew exactly what was important to her and how she was presenting herself as an artist, and the inner story that she would want to tell through the music that you were working on collaboratively?
Well, Katy is an incredible songwriter on her own. When I met her back in the day, I remember going and seeing her play acoustic shows at Hotel Cafe, and she already had a really strong lyrical talent. And so she's one of my favorite people to write with because she makes it easy. A lot of artists struggle with lyrics, and then I'm doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But Katy really knows what she wants and knows what she wants to say. So it takes a lot of the work out of it for me. And also, we have this weird cosmic connection where we can finish each other's sentences, and we'll both show up with concepts and have some of the same concepts, not like common ones, like weird ones where you're like, whoa, weird. I just wrote that down. How did you know? Like, we have sort of a psychic connection in that way. So when it comes to writing for her stuff, us being friends first helped a lot because it was easy for her to open up to me. Although it's like, you really get right into real talk when you're in a songwriting room, because there's no like, oh, I don't really know this person, so I'm guarded. It's like, all right, we've got a job to do. Let's get to the heart of it. There's no messing around. So yeah, she makes it a lot easier because she knows herself. She's very emotionally intelligent. And I think that's why the work that we did so well, because there's a lot of heart behind it.
In shifting how you've been working over the last year and working remotely, have you only been working with collaborators that you've worked with before, or have you had to really set out building that rapport and that intimate relationship in virtual settings with any of your collaborators?
I've definitely worked with a lot of people that I've never met in person, and I've built a lot of friendships, actually. I'm so excited to meet them in person and hug them and kiss them. And, I can't wait. The thing that I look forward to most is like dancing with people again. Like, the fantasy that I have is like going out for the first time and, having a song come on and everybody dancing together and hugging and crying. So yeah, I've been virtually making a lot of friends, and also working with people that are, tried and true, trusted collaborators that I've worked with for years.
Yeah. And throughout your entire career in writing songs with other people, you've also continued to write and release your own music. What are some of the things that you feel that you've had the opportunity to learn from the collaborators that you've been working with in songwriting, and really just observing and watching the way that they go into the booth, the way that they perform, that you've been able to then carry through to your own work as a performer?
Mhm. I think I learned the most from Max Martin, who is like, the Yoda of songwriting. He taught me a lot about symmetry in songwriting, and how each piece of a song should feel like a hook in itself. So structure was the biggest thing that I learned. I always kind of had a knack for melody, but it was a little more meandering earlier on. And he really taught me about the math involved in pop music. And that sounds very rigid, but it's so satisfying. It's like when you're watching like satisfying videos on YouTube or whatever, like that's what it feels like for me, writing like a symmetrically sound pop song.
It's your ASMR video.
Yes.
Well, with the idea, obviously there is a kind of certain formula and structure within pop music and every genre specifically. How much do you then allow yourself to play with it? It's almost like you have to learn the rules to then be able to break them. And what are the ways that you most enjoy playing with that structure when you break the rules a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's important to learn the rules so that you're conscious of breaking them rather than just like making mistakes. And I remember getting in like a very emotional fight with Max Martin early on when I was a young grasshopper. And I would write something and he would be like, "That's wrong." And I was like, "It's art. It can't be wrong. There's no right and wrong." And he's like, "Yes, there is." And now I hear myself saying that to younger songwriters where I'm like, "Oh, I see like where the math doesn't add up." So when it comes to breaking the rules, I think it's fun to do, like There are some big songs that have come out that have like on purpose weird rhymes or things that don't rhyme on purpose, or unexpected rhythms that you hear. And as a songwriter, I'm always listening for those little kind of Easter eggs, being like, oh, like you did that on purpose, not just like, oh, this person doesn't know what they're doing, you know? So yeah.
It's also so fascinating when you think about rhyming structure within songwriting and lyrics as well, that I imagine that the more you write, the more you just start to instinctively know where the potential next line can come from, because you know exactly what words fit together, and how you can place them. Do you find that that just naturally flows when you're thinking about the rhyme and the rhythm?
Definitely. And, you know, I'm like a walking rhyming dictionary where it's like there are only so many songs that or words that phonetically sound great, you know? And I have like whole lists that I've made of like splashy words that rhyme with hey or with babe or with, you know, me or I, whatever it is. Like I have a whole Rolodex of interesting words that rhyme with the basic words. And the basic words, like you want to, I call the basic words, or the kind of pedestrian words, high quality filler, where it's like, okay, yeah, yes, we've heard this word in a song a million times, but it's like, it hits home, it gets the point across, it's clear. People that don't speak English understand it and can sing along with it. And then I try to mix those in with the splashier, more interesting, unusual words. And I think that's what makes a song interesting, is to not be completely full of just HQ filler, but also not being so complicated and using unfamiliar words that it's hard to remember.
Right. And to that point, it also really has to feel like that whoever is singing it, whether it's you or another artist, that you're telling us a story
Mhm.
through that, that we believably would be sitting in a room listening to you telling us and recounting this. So within that, are there language structures or usage or words that you find yourself really actively avoiding because it just doesn't feel like a naturalistic speech within a song?
I think, you know, as long as something sings well phonetically, that was another thing that Max taught me, was phonetics are everything. So if something sings well, then you can get away with weird words. So it's really just about if it sings naturally. So I don't think any words are off limits necessarily. It's just about how it fits in the phrase, and if it sounds the way that you would say it in a sentence. So it's not necessarily words that you wouldn't say. It's just like, you know, the right emphasis on the right syllable, you know, because when people put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, then it feels unnatural and it's harder for the audience to kind of sing along with, because it should sound like you're speaking it, you know.
Yeah. And to the point that you were mentioning before about conversations where there is a right and a wrong answer to certain points within art and conversations that need to happen. Obviously, you know, creatively, everyone brings a certain level of emotion, and it's a space that everybody's very invested in. How have you kind of figured out the best way to navigate and approach those types of conversations when you're trying to veer someone away from an idea because you just see that it's not ultimately going to work or be the right fit?
Yeah, sometimes it's like wrestling an alligator, depending on the artist that you're working with, where, you know, an artist will be really stuck on an idea and you're just like, that's just not it. That's just not relatable, or it's been done a million times, or whatever it is. And I always will indulge them, and because I'm like, well, maybe this will lead to something, you know? So I always want to make the artist feel comfortable and make sure that I'm doing everything I can to help them really see their vision through. But there've definitely been times where I've had to like talk people out of something, and that's an art in itself.
Separately, one of the things that I love about a lot of your music performances is that when you do cover versions, you always find such distinctive voices within music that we're already so familiar with. Like I'm thinking about the Billie Eilish Lovely one that you did, that, you know, so many people have seen and responded to. What does that journey look like in your process when you're taking a song that especially is one that people just know the fabric of and feel in their body already, and then breaking it down and almost rebuilding it structurally and sound wise?
Yeah, I love doing covers. It's really fun to reimagine. Especially, I mean, I think the most important thing for me for a cover is that the lyric is emotional and interesting, because, you know, in the same way with acting, where you can say the same line a bunch of different ways and it has a different emotional connotation. It's the same way with lyrics in a song. Um, you know, the best thing I always feel is to turn something on its head when you do a cover, and not just do like a lesser version of the same emotional tones that you already know and love in the original. Like you're not going to beat the original. So with Lovely, for example, I took it and kind of like a sad disco direction with my friend Jamie Reed, and it was really fun, but it still had that like crying in the club kind of feel, you know. Um, yeah, it's a lot of fun to sort of reimagine songs that everybody already knows and loves.
And you've also released music both with record labels and independently. When you went into releasing music independently, to have, you know, that element of creative control and complete freedom in how you were putting your music out there as an artist, what are the things that you feel had actually been valuable about still going through the label experience, you know, and learning the business side and seeing how they operate, that you were then bringing into the music that you were releasing independently by yourself?
You know, I think the hardest part about being independent is not having a full team of people working on something. Because, you know, when they've invested money in you and they've paid for everything, then they want a return on their investment. So there's a whole building full of people that are willing to work for you. And when it's just me, I'm just like, you know, I'm only one person. I only have two hands. And, you know, I'm able to hire people independently to help me, and it's worked out. But it's nice to have someone else's money paying for it too, you know. Like I've made my money back that I've invested, but it's nice to have somebody else front it. But it's so worth it to have control over it. You know, it's so irritating to work in a major label system where it's like everything moves like glaciers. It's just, it has to go run up the flagpole and 30 people have to approve something. And I really don't like having anything between my art and my audience. I just, if I want to put something out, I want to put it out. So, yeah.
And with that sense of artistic control, both through your experience signing with a label when you first moved to LA, and just also looking at a lot of the artists that you've worked with in their journeys, what do you feel are the important questions that songwriters and artists should be asking when they're looking at potential label collaborators, and making sure that at the end of the day, they still have their best interest in heart and that they're going to get to put forth the voice and the music in the way that they want to?
There are no guarantees, because I mean, the first thing I would think is like, sign somewhere where you feel like you connect with the people that are going to be on your team. But it's such a high turnover rate at these labels that it's like the person that you signed with could be gone in 6 months, and then there's nobody there to champion you, you know, where when someone else new comes on your project, it's like, oh, I didn't sign this, so I don't care as much. So it's like, that's the problem, is that like, even if you have a major label deal, you still need, like, I remember thinking when I've had two major label deals, and both times I kind of like relaxed into it, where it's like, oh, I have a deal, so like they're going to do all the work. No, like you have to work just as hard when you have a deal as if you don't, because nobody cares about your project as much as you do. So I still am very hands-on anytime I'm working with a major label or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also wanted to talk about your short film, April Kills the Vibe, and you know, and just the journey of writing that script, because you wrote it from incredibly personal experience and a time and space that you know, has a traumatic experience for you emotionally as well to be revisiting. So what was that journey of really taking that and turning it into the script, and the catharsis that almost came from that journey?
Well, you know, I originally wanted to just shoot a scene for my acting reel because I wanted to get more into acting again. And I had a few scenes that I gotten in my acting class, and I just wasn't really connecting with anything. And I had this concept for a show that was basically based on my life as a songwriter and my, you know, adventures in Hollywood. And there's a lot of pretty dramatic stuff that happened. And I had been playing with a few scenes, and so I was like, well, I mean, I already have this, maybe I'll just try that. And then when I was writing the scene, it was longer than a scene. Like I didn't realize that like it's a page per minute usually, but these are all new things to me. It's really fun being a rookie in a new industry. So I'm learning all kinds of tricks. And I was like, well, this is more like a short film, so I might as well just go for it. And in writing it was definitely pretty dark for me, digging through my past and revisiting these traumatic events. But it was also, like you said, very cathartic. And I mean, it made it easier. It almost feels like cheating as far as being an actor goes, because I had all of this raw emotion just under the surface that I had access to. So I didn't really have to use my imagination too much, and it made it a lot easier to do the performance. But it was still really triggering and crazy. But also, it was nice. It was nice to be on set and even though I was like reliving this horrible thing, I got to be in control of the narrative. So it was kind of like taking back the control. And it was really a healing experience for me.
That's wonderful. Was the intention when you knew that this was going to be a short film always going to be that you were going to play two parts in the film as well?
I didn't plan to originally. But honestly, when I was writing the script, I mean, I went into it with Lola being a villain, and April being the hero or the victim kind of. And then as I was writing it, I had the unfortunate realization that I have been Lola. I've been on both sides of this difficult conversation. I have been slut shamed. I have had people not believe me. And I've also been dismissive of friends that are blackout drunks when something happens, or it's like, what else is new, So it was important to me to play both roles, not only to sort of hold myself accountable for my part in it, but to forgive Lola and to stand in her shoes and think about what does it feel like. And so that I really didn't expect to get that experience out of making this film, but I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah. I also thought it was really interesting the way that you explore the couple's relationship within the film as well, and sobriety and what that means to the two of them, because we see that he's gotten sober and she hasn't yet at the point that we meet her. And that brings such an interesting dynamic between the two of them, even though there's really only one or two brief scenes with them together. What were the ways in which you really wanted to explore that through these characters?
Oh, well, once again, I've been on both sides of that too. I've been the drunk one in a relationship where my partner is sober, and I've been the sober one when my partner is not. And it's a really painful experience to watch someone that you love destroy themselves. And in the program that I'm a part of, it's about attraction and not preaching. Like you're not supposed to try to talk someone into going. It's something where you just lead by example. So showing the frustration that Grant has watching her fall apart, and wanting to just shake her and say, get your shit together. That's something that I've felt, and I know that my partners have felt in the past too. So it's a delicate balance to try to just lead by example to help someone. And it's extremely heartbreaking. So I don't know. I'm glad that I got to explore that thing too, because I don't feel like I've seen a lot about that in movies and film.
Yeah, and also when you look at those first few scenes, they're incredibly emotionally raw for April as she's processing and trying to figure out what happened and piece together the memory. Did you find that it actually helped you and was beneficial to be directing yourself in that moment, because you don't have a scene partner and it just kind of gives you the freedom to really sit with that character, think about the space that you're in, and really take whatever time that you need without having to think about anybody else in that moment?
Yeah, it's just such a personal moment. And I was really able to kind of go back to that morning and remember what that felt like. Um, I mean, it was weird. I think that when I was I also was always kind of living in my own private movie where it was like, I glamorized it a little bit, and it was just like, look how tragic I am. Look what a mess I am. And so, I mean, I think I had like thought about that a lot. Like every time I would have these sort of out of body experiences when I would have traumatic things happen, where I would be watching myself, So it was kind of meta to be actually watching myself do that. It was really hard to direct myself though. Luckily I had my acting coach on set with me, Tom Draper, who's incredible. And it was just nice to have another pair of eyes on the monitor where he could come and be like, okay, this is great. Turn a little bit this way, do this, whatever. And remember that, keep this in mind. That was the hardest part, was just not being able to look at the screen to see how it looked, mostly about framing, less about performance. But so that's something that I definitely learned was hard about directing myself, is that I can't see the frame.
Yeah.
So I don't know. if I had more time next time, then I would like to be able to watch everything back as I go. But it's just, when you're on the clock, everything's time's money. So
yeah. And beyond even just directing, writing, playing two characters, you also produced it, you edited it, you did production design. Did you always want to have that element of involvement in all of those different spaces, or was part of it just the necessity of what comes with making a short film?
Well, I mean, I think it's a necessity that comes with making a short film in quarantine, but also I am such a perfectionist. I am so like controlling and detail oriented that I have a hard time delegating. So I feel like when I hand things off to other people, it's never just how I want it to be. And so I would rather slave over it and get it exactly how I want it to be. And also it was important to me to do everything because I wanted to learn how it works. Even because I had a friend do the sound mixing stuff for me because it's a completely different animal, mixing dialogue with the music and with the Foley and all of that stuff than mixing music. And I was like, I want to sit down with you and see how you do it. I want to watch it. I want to know how all of this works. And so it was really a crash course in filmmaking, being so hands-on in every aspect of it.
Yeah, well, I'm so impressed by what you managed to pull together and all of the different roles that you took on. And thank you so much for talking to us all about your film and your incredible songwriting career.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.